23 Cubans are busted in Tampa for driving Maseratis. On today's video, we're going to talk about a case that unfolded here in the Tampa area where a bunch of Cubans were outright balling in Maseratis, Ferraris, and other expensive vehicles that were stolen. They got hit with RICO charges. That's federal racketeering charges, usually up to 30 years maximum. This network of dang Cubans was working out of the Tampa and Southwest Florida area, places like Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and Plant City, driving Bentleys. The initial investigation stemmed from a network that was selling fake CDL driver's licenses. That is a commercial driver's license. You can literally buy a fake commercial driver's license in Florida. This isn't a new scheme. In the state of Florida, you've been able to buy a fake driver's license with a commercial endorsement for a while now. So if this is your first time hearing about the fact that you can buy a dang driver's license to drive a 53-foot semi-truck, it's nothing new to Floridians. This has been happening in Florida for decades. However, while investigating the driver's license scheme, the investigators noticed, hey man, well that Cubans are driving a dang Bentley. And the investigators met with them again, and then they were like, hey man, he's in a Ferrari now. Hey Larry, how come I don't get a Ferrari? I've been driving this F-350 for years now. So to catch these 23 Cubans, they put in 12,000 man-hours and 700 individual investigations. Well, Larry, let's catch them red-handed right now, Larry. Let's get them. Now, hold on, buddy. We could go catch these Cubans right now, and we're only getting paid $27 an hour. But look here. If we stretch this out over 12,000 hours, we could make $336,000, and then we can get our own damn Bentley. So yes, it literally took 12,000 man-hours, took the state of Florida nearly $336,000 in man-hours to arrest 23 Cubans who probably could have just got detained on the spot for running a dang driver's license. I don't know what the crap you call that. If you guys remember my Hialeah flea market food stamp video, I told you guys that you could buy a driver's license in Florida. That was about 10 years ago. I'm surprised that this scam is still a relevant thing, and that the state of Florida, decades later, still hasn't figured out how to stop people from getting a fake driver's license to drive a 53-foot semi-truck. They sure figured out how to jack up your insurance rates, though. Isn't it really an embarrassment for the state of Florida that for decades now you've been able to buy a driver's license to drive a semi-truck? Now look at here, Pablo. Now you can go and take this test and learn how to safely drive this dang 53-foot. I got a Cuban in Miami that for $500 make the same thing happen with none of the safety requirements. This case is really a huge embarrassment to Florida Department of Law Enforcement, in that this particular scam with the driver's license has been going on in Florida for so long, and they still haven't figured out how to stop it. The 30-minute press conference was cut short when a reporter asked a great question. What the crap have you guys been doing to protect the citizens of Florida from scams like these? Well, we're just here to protect the dang insurance companies. That's all we really care about. And then they walked off stage. I just want to congratulate that reporter for being a real journalist and asking the right questions, because it seems like the only thing that the Florida state's worried about is protecting the insurance companies, as these were not the only crimes that these dang Cubans were involved in. It seems like protecting the interests of the national insurance bureaus and Department of Insurance Fraud and all types of organizations related to insurance in Florida was the only real interest at heart that the state of Florida had in this case, being that these particular schemes have been happening in Florida for decades now, and law enforcement has done nothing to actually prevent it from happening. When another great question was asked by another reporter, or the same one, along the lines of, how much of this network do you guys take down? The answer was something like, well, we took down like 23 Cubans. You want more? We'll get more Cubans. How many Cubans do you want? The questions from the reporters highlighted the obvious, that the state of Florida avidly protects the rights of insurance companies, but does very little to protect the citizens when they're being scammed. Of course, they could have just taken the initial report and arrested the people for the case, which would have possibly got them about the same jail sentence as this entire complicated RICO case. They could have even arrested them for possession of stolen vehicles, whatever they had on them, but they decided to turn it into a RICO case and invest over $300,000 just in man hours devoted to the particular cause of creating a 700 case indictment against 23 people who probably had enough hot evidence on them to get them about the same type of charges regardless. All this effort to protect the interests of insurance companies while not protecting the interests of people who are being scammed. Now, how many times have I told you to never buy a car in Hialeah? These people dedicate themselves specifically to stolen cars, stolen VIN numbers, and turning cars that are damaged or salvaged into normal vehicles on paper and defrauding the crap out of you. For about the last 5 years, every single vehicle that I have purchased has been purchased directly through a dealership. You can no longer buy used cars on the streets in Florida, specifically cars that are $20, $30, $40, $50,000, and if you're dumb enough to actually bring cash money. Well, Jose, you know I'm retarded. I pay cash for everything out there, and I got a 12-page pop gun in my truck, so I can pop anybody that do to me, you know. And then you walk away with a car that has a VIN number that's fake and register it to your name. And if you should have known that the car was stolen, you then go from being the victim to being involved in criminal activity. If a deal sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Hey, Jose, I just bought a Bentley for $10,000 from a Cuban in Hialeah right outside of Fish Market. Man, I got a deal of a lifetime. Yeah, it's probably stolen. In the process of discovering all the criminal illicit activity that these dang Cubans were involved in, they mentioned something that I've been a victim of as well. It's where you walk into an insurance company, they give you a premium, you pay it up front, and then a month later you find out your insurance gets canceled because it wasn't registered the right way. This is when you use an intermediary person that gets insurance for you, like those people that advertise, we'll get you the best insurance rate. That is a scam. And it actually happened to me and the old lady. This lady called Monica in Bonita Springs actually did this scam to us. They pocket the money and they make you walk out the door thinking that you've prepaid 6 months of insurance, when in reality, no real insurance coverage is being provided because the way they registered it, they knew wasn't going to get approved. They make mistakes on error so that the insurance company turns it back and says denied, but you've already walked out of the office with an insurance paperwork and you think you're covered until you get pulled over and just about get arrested. Places like Lehigh Acres, while living there, even with a clean record, I was paying as much as $530 for car insurance for 2 vehicles. Insurance laws in the state of Florida are a complete mess. Ineffective and leaving the people vulnerable, a lot of times being scammed. Orchestrate all of these scams and frauds, continue to do it with complete impunity, because the more scams and more frauds that are prevalent in Florida, the more the insurance companies get to jack up their rates. In a sense, all these frauds and scams that are prevalent in the state of Florida are definitely benefiting the companies who can charge you more liability because of the propenseness of scams and frauds. Of course, law enforcement and the agencies like the district attorney, whose job it is to make sure these things stop from happening, are clearly in bed with the insurance companies, making sure that these scams get just enough coverage where they can ensure that they can charge you the liability for it, but not enough to where it stops it, and then they can't charge you for the liability. Whether you're trying to insure your home in the state of Florida or your vehicle, people are just tired of how ineffective the system is, how much the insurance companies are jacking up the rates, yet how nothing gets done about the people who are out there frauding, because those are the people that give the insurance company the liability they need to charge you more. If you're still stupid enough to buy a vehicle cash on the streets of Florida, at least make sure it's not in Tampa or Hialeah. You can actually walk into the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, or into a bank and you can deposit the money directly into your bank account, and the person that's doing the transaction is inside of a confined space where if they're doing some type of scam, they can back out. I was actually going to do a business transaction with somebody for like about $10,000, and when I told them to meet me at the bank, they completely disappeared. They wanted to handle the transaction out in the street. The idea of meeting you at a bank to deposit the money into an account, or the idea of going to a DMV and making sure that the paperwork is good, will deter a lot of scammers from wanting to use you as a dang guinea pig. I kid you not, I have literally had sellers back out of a transaction when you tell them that you have to do it inside of a bank or of a DMV. If you are selling a vehicle, you take the buyer to your bank, and once the money's been checked by your bank and deposited into your account, at that moment you can give them the title. If the money's fake, which is another huge thing in Florida, then that person will not be able to purchase your vehicle at the time the bank denotes that the money's not real. They also can't turn back around and rob you because you're inside of a bank, because part 2 is coming back and robbing you the same night or the day after is another scam in Florida. Somebody buys something from you, they pay cash, and then once they know that you have the cash on you, immediately afterwards you get robbed. Well, Jose, it's an old elderly lady. I'm not going to make an 85-year-old lady go to the DMV with me over just $20,000. And I'm sure her grandson isn't part of the scheme as well. He just got out of the pen. You need to use your brain. If you're a seller, that's the way you want to go about these transactions. Right now, either buying or selling is a huge liability. The best thing you can do is purchase a new vehicle that will last you for a very long time, and don't be trading in and out of vehicles. Own what you need and don't change too often, because every time you change is a potential not only for you to lose money, but also to be the victim of a fraud or scam. When it comes to purchasing a vehicle, even a person as versed as I am has been going directly to dealerships lately and not buying vehicles on the street. The amount of things that can go wrong is completely endless. The vehicle's VIN number could be fake. The title could be fake. The vehicle could have liens on it. The vehicle could be a salvaged vehicle that now looks on paperwork like it's clean because somebody was able to change the title, which is not a surprise after all in the corrupt state of Florida. If you're going to buy a vehicle cash, your best bet is to do it directly from a dealership. And even at a dealership, the people that were caught during this raid here, the 23 people, a lot of them were involved with dealerships. Don't think just because it's a dealership that it's safe. When I say a dealership, I'm talking about a massive company, a Kia, a Toyota, directly from one of those companies. I'm not talking about Big Larry on US 19. I'm talking about you need to go to a big dealership. And even there, you have to be very careful how they handle your paperwork and everything that has to do with the vehicle you're buying, because I have seen cases where even a dealership will try to scam you in Florida. So word of advice and wisdom from the more experienced, don't buy a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 cash in the state of Florida. And if you are going to do it, you at least need a photo of the driver's license of the person who's selling you the vehicle. You're going to make sure that that person who's selling you the vehicle is the person that the vehicle is registered to, that the VIN numbers match up, and that the VIN numbers appear to be legitimate. And paperwork to prove where they got the vehicle from and how long they've had the vehicle is a huge clue to if this is an authentic sale or if there's something fishy. Many times I've looked at vehicles in the state of Florida and you think, oh, you know, I'm selling this vehicle for whatever reason, and then you see, oh, you registered this vehicle 2 months ago. Why are you selling this vehicle within a 2-month period? That doesn't really make sense. That is definitely a red flag. How long they've had the vehicle is a huge indicator to what type of crappery could be going on. Usually you don't make a large purchase like a vehicle and then have to sell it 2 months later. There's a lot of red flags with a situation like that. A lot of vehicles were flooded in Florida, and the person who owned the vehicle did not want to report it to the insurance company that their vehicle flooded because their credit is no longer in good standing and they wouldn't be able to finance another vehicle. So instead of reporting that their vehicle was flooded during the hurricane, they just try to dry the vehicle and continue with the vehicle for a short period of time, but it's actually a flooded vehicle, even though on paper it's not registered as a flooded vehicle. One of the best places to see if a vehicle was flooded is underneath the compartment of the spare tire. That requires taking out the spare tire, and if the vehicle was flooded, water seems to accumulate there by condensation over time. Another absolute red flag is if the windows condensate from the inside. What this criminal case does is it opens a window into what types of criminal activities are happening in the state of Florida. You can see how this criminal syndicate was involved in selling fake driver's license, scamming people for fake insurance policies, replacing vehicles that were stolen with fake VIN numbers. One of the people involved had 159 vehicles registered to his name. You have to do your due diligence. I was recently looking at an $80,000 car that I found. It was a Porsche. The person trying to sell it was 22 years old. In what world does a 22-year-old have a $70,000 car paid off? Just by their Facebook profile, I could tell that they recently arrived to the United States from Venezuela. In what world does a 22-year-old person that just arrived in the United States drive around in a $70,000 or $80,000 car? Clearly, the deal was too good to be true anyways. There were red flags all over this situation, but a buyer who thinks they're going to get a good deal many times will overlook all those red flags that are very clear that there's something wrong because they think they're going to get a good deal. In today's world, good deals don't exist. You're going to pay a premium for something if you want it, and if you think you're getting a good deal, you may later find out that instead of thinking you got somebody off and you got a great deal, you ended up with something that was clearly stolen. Part of this network scheme was going to places like Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee and buying vehicles with checks, driving the car off the lot. The check bounced, but the vehicle was gone. And then at that point, they were able to replace the VIN numbers or duplicate the VIN number and the tag with another existing vehicle of the same year and model. With State Bill 1718, we saw people from Florida that were illegal moving to states like California and New York, and a lot of people took pictures of removing the Florida tags and replacing it with their new state tags. Let me ask you a question. How was somebody who's illegal in Florida able to purchase a vehicle and get a tag from the state of Florida? Does that make any sense to you? If they were in fact illegally living in Florida, how do they have a vehicle registered with a Florida driver's license and a Florida plate? There's a lot of inefficiency when it comes to how the state of Florida is run, and these types of scams will continue since the priority of the state of Florida isn't protecting the citizens from scams, but ensuring that the insurance companies, the real big dollar payers, or the insurance companies, they have lobbyists that make sure that their interests are always being looked out for. Those are the ones who are always going to be winning. So while the citizens like me and you are every day being charged more and more liabilities by insurance companies, and we're constantly being defrauded on the street, nothing's being done to prevent these scams from taking place. More surprising to me is that if you look at the charges that are being pressed against these people, these scams have existed in Florida for decades now, whether it's the CDL, the insurance scam, the title scam, the driver's license scams. All these registration of title scams have been going on in Florida for a very long time. You think the state of Florida would have taken preventative steps and these types of scams would have been phased out, but repetitively we find ourselves decade after decade looking at the same scams in the state of Florida. One would think that after thousands of the same type of scams happening over and over again in the state of Florida, that they would make laws to, in effect, prevent these things from happening. You don't need to spend 12,000 man hours to lock up 23 people for these crimes. All you have to do is open your Facebook marketplace and you're going to see a Porsche that's worth $140,000 for sale for $70,000, and they want cash, and the person selling it is only 22 years old. It took me 34 seconds to do what the state of Florida needed 12,000 hours for, and at least $336,000 in paid man hours. And of course, all that to benefit not me and you preventing us from being scammed in the future, but just making sure that the insurance companies don't lose a dollar. And if you look at the charges it really doesn't highlight the criminality of these people involved. What it really highlights is how ineffective the state laws of Florida are, and that a bunch of people that in the most part probably don't even know how to speak English are able to defraud an entire system, from DMVs to Florida law enforcement to us as individuals who are somehow being tricked by these people with the same old scams decade after decade. The fact that some of these crime syndicates are able to continue to perpetrate the same types of crime decade after decade only goes to show how ineffective the Florida law system is. Not only that, despite the fact it's a federal RICO charge, these are hard to beat cases. When it comes down to presenting the evidence and being able to actually incriminate these people, they're going to need an overwhelming amount of evidence, because most likely most of these charges are not going to stand in court. When you look at the fact that there are 700 individual charges, we could probably assume that per every 1,000 crimes these syndicates create, maybe only one of them leads to a freaking conviction. Do you think it's about time the state of Florida fixes these legal loopholes that allow people to pull driver's licenses from the back of a cafeteria in Hialeah? This isn't just happening in Tampa. This is happening throughout the entirety of the state of Florida. It seems like the people being charged here are not being charged with one particular type of scam they mastered. They have a whole handbook of different things, and one individual can be involved in several different types of criminal schemes at once. That would suggest it's not really difficult to engage in these types of scams if one individual can be involved in so many complex criminal activities. It means that they're so easy to duplicate these scams that one individual, instead of mastering one particular thing, can actually be involved in 5 or 6 different types of scams, which just goes to show how easy it is for criminals to be able to exploit the system that's currently in place. De madre hacer. They don't even have to come up with new scams. They can just keep doing the same thing over and over, since the state of Florida is so ineffective at stopping them.